Is the weakest defensive position in the Pat Narduzzi era about to become the strength of Pitt's defense? We're breaking down the linebackers on today's Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. All right, it's Tuesday here on the Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com. You see the website below, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. The most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, and recruiting. You can find it all at Panther-Lair.com, and you can find it all on the front page at Panther-Lair.com right now. Extended discussions and topics and coverage of Pitt football and basketball, all right there at Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com, and message boards where everybody's talking about all of it. With the Pitt basketball team coming off its trip to Spain, over the last 2 weeks, there's a lot of conversation on the basketball boards right now. We have a nice film breakdown of Carlton Carrington, who was one of the stars of that foreign trip. And so you can check out the film breakdown from our guy, Steven Gertz. And then, of course, a lot of football stuff going on in the middle of training camp as we get closer and closer to the start of the season, just a few weeks away. And Pitt moving through week number 3 of training camp right now. They'll be at it in the South Side this morning. I'll be down there in just a couple hours, so we've definitely got a lot to talk about there, and we're talking about a lot on the message boards. If you want to be part of a community of Pitt fans, this is the best place to do it. Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. I think it's the best online community of Pitt fans that you're going to find. So go check out the message boards and the content at Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. Then our YouTube channel here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, where we have all kinds of exclusive Pitt video content, occasionally with some ambient sounds from a couple of canines in the background. But we have these daily Morning Pitt videos Monday through Friday. We have our live show that we do every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. Me and Jim Hammett will be with you tomorrow night talking about Pitt football and basketball and recruiting and anything else you want to discuss. We have post-practice interviews. We have practice highlights. We have Pat Narduzzi press conferences. Everything right there at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So you know what we always ask you to do. Like this video and subscribe so you don't miss any of our content at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Now, like I said at the beginning, we're talking about linebackers today. And, you know, you've been following along all summer. We've been going position by position, week by week. We're up to the linebacker. Well, we just finished linebackers last week. So we have the corners this week and safeties next week. So, this is like week 9. This has been going on for close. This is ultimately will be 10 weeks as we go position by position: quarterback, running back, receiver, tight end, O-line, DN, D tackle, linebacker. Now we're up to corners this week. Jim Hammett's doing a lot of writing about the corners this week, and then we'll have the safeties next week. And so last week was linebacker week, and if you've been following our series of position previews, the way we've been breaking it down, on Monday we do 5 questions about the linebackers, and then on Tuesday we do comings and goings. Who's gone from the roster from last year? Who's coming in? And then on Wednesday, or the third day on the week, depending on how it shakes out, we preview the depth chart. We project the depth chart at the position. Thursday, we do the 5 best players at the position from the Pat Narduzzi era. And then on Friday, we do a bold prediction about the position. So I wrote about the linebackers last week. And, 5 questions about the linebackers. Not too tough to figure out of questions. You got to replace Servassier Dennis. Is Bengali Kamara going to make a big step up? How's the depth going to fill out? Are Shane Simon and Solomon DeShields ready for new roles? And are the freshmen going to be a part of it? How are the freshmen going to figure in? That's pretty easy to do. Comings and goings, not too tough. There were two linebackers from last year that are gone: Servassier Dennis and Tyler Wiltz, and then there are 3 freshmen who came in. That's not hard to figure out. That was pretty easy to put together. Depth chart, a little bit tricky to project, but not too tough. I think we have a general idea of what it's going to look like. There's maybe like 1 or 2 depth spots that we're not entirely sure who's going to fill those on the 2 deep, but made educated guesses. Not too tough to figure out. And I'll skip day 4 because we'll come back to that. Day 5, the bold prediction, you probably wouldn't even count it as a bold prediction anymore that I'm making predictions about Bengali Kamara. If you've watched these videos, either Morning Pitt videos or the live stream or basically anything for the past year, because this goes back to training camp last year that I've been the chief engineer on the Bengali Kamara hype train. I'm not going to do the train whistle today. Although I might for Bub Means, but we're not talking about wide receivers today. We're not talking about Bub Means. I'm not going to do the train whistle today, but I've been driving that Bengali Kamara hype train for a long time, so it should come as no surprise that my bold prediction for the week, for linebacker week, has to do with Bengali Kamara. And I forget what I predicted. All ACC, stat stuffing, et cetera, et cetera. This is what I think he's going to do. I think he's going to be an all-conference player. I think he's going to fill up the stat sheet with tackles and tackles for loss and sacks and interceptions and forced fumbles and fumble recoveries. He'll probably score a touchdown or two, and he'll be a draft pick next spring. Not a bold prediction because I've been saying all this for a long time. And so you probably could have written the Bengali Kamara bold prediction section for me. I probably could have let you do it. And actually, if I had AI watch all of these Morning Pitt videos dating back to last summer and then asked it to write a bold prediction about Bengali Kamara, it probably could do a really good job. And probably could have written it better than I wrote it, just based on what information it would have processed from my talks here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So that wasn't too tough to put together. But day 4 of the series was not easy. And we actually have a long conversation. There's still a thread that's ongoing on the message boards about this. Ranking the top 5 linebackers of the Narduzzi era. And this was tougher than I expected it to be. I didn't think about it too much before I sat down to start writing it. But when I sat down, I was like, okay, let's start with number 1. That's easy. Servassier Dennis. Good. Number 2. Number 3. 4. 5. And it got to a point, and I started filling in 1 or 2 guys. But it got to a point where I started asking myself, I started thinking, who are even the 5 guys? Never mind how they're ranked, but who are even the 5 guys who make the list? And I wrote it, I think we might have published it on Thursday afternoon. And so Thursday morning, I was still in the process of writing it. And I was down at Pitt for training camp, for practice last Thursday. And I talked to some of the guys who work in Pitt's media information department. And I talked to a couple of the other writers. I talked to Jerry DePaula and a few of those guys. And I was like, guys, how would you rank the top 5 linebackers of the Narduzzi era? And I said, I think number 1 is easy. And everybody's like, Servassier, right? I'm like, yeah, Servassier Dennis. But 2 through 5 is a little dicey. Now, here's what I ended up with. Number 2, I went with Kylan Johnson. Even though he only played 1 year at Pitt, that 2019 defense was really good, and I think he was really good on that defense. He had 10.5 tackles for loss. He had 6.5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles. He only played 1 season, but again, given some of the competition we're talking about, he was as good as anyone and possibly better. I figured Phil Campbell has to be on the list. I figured Cam Bright, because he had pretty decent stats over the course of 4 years. He had 23.5 tackles for loss and 9 sacks, 3 forced fumbles, 3 fumble recoveries, 1 interception. He had the fumble recovery, the scoop and score against Michigan State in the Peach Bowl. So I figure he should be in there. Phil Campbell, 14.5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, 23 tackles for loss in 3 years, 2 interceptions, a fumble recovery. He had an interception against UCF in 2019. He had 12 tackles in the Peach Bowl, so he should probably be in there. And I was still kind of hunting around. I'm like, am I going to end up putting Bengali Kamara in the top 5 linebackers of the Narduzzi era? Even I, someone who is, the Casey Jones of the Bengali Kamara hype train, even I think it's a bit of a stretch to put Kamara in there yet. He'll be in there next year. Next summer, when we do this series again and we rank the linebackers, Bengali Kamara will be number 2 or number 3. I'm confident of that. But it feels like a stretch to say he's been one of the 5 best to this point. But such is the lack of depth and impact the linebackers have made at Pitt over the last 8 years that it's a consideration. Now, ultimately, I settled on Shine Idowu, who again, this might speak to the lack of depth and impact the linebackers have made, but I know it was remarkably productive from 2016 to 2018. He made 37 starts in those 3 seasons, 37 out of 39 games. He played in all 39. He started 37 games. I think he finished over 3 seasons. He had 252 tackles, 23 tackles for loss, 7.5 sacks, 5 forced fumbles, and a fumble recovery. He was, I think, like 3rd on the team in tackles in 2016, 1st in 2017, 2nd in 2018. So he was a top 3 tackler on all 3 of those defenses in 3 years where I think the defense progressively got better and better and better. The Penn State game in 2016, he had 6 tackles and a forced fumble. At Clemson that year when they won at Clemson, he had 10 tackles. 2017, he led the team in tackles for loss and sacks, and he was an all-ACC second team selection according to the media, and that's an important distinction to make, media versus coaches poll. But it speaks to, and I say this as no disrespect to Sean Idowu, who was a great kid and a better player than he probably got credit for. But it speaks to, again, the lack of depth and the lack of impact the linebackers have made over the last 8 years. Then when we're ranking the top 5 linebackers in the Narduzzi era, not only did I seriously consider a former walk-on safety who converted to scholarship linebacker, but I actually put him on the list, and I put him on the list at number 3, behind Servassier Dennis and Kylan Johnson. All of this is a setup to say that over the last 8 years when we've seen the defensive line flourish at Pitt and the defensive backfield flourish at Pitt, there's been a gap in the middle of the defense, and it's been the linebacker position. Pitt has had, since Narduzzi arrived, in the last 8 years, 3 defensive ends, 2 defensive tackles, 4 cornerbacks, and 4 safeties drafted. 13 players. 5 defensive linemen and 8 defensive backs. 13 players drafted from the defensive line and the defensive backfield. They've had 1 linebacker drafted, and it was this spring. Servassier Dennis was the first linebacker drafted under Pat Narduzzi. Don't give me, Patrick Jones or Rashad Weaver or Juan Price, that those guys were drafted as linebackers, edge rushers. You know what I'm talking about, and that's not it. We're talking about a 4-3 defense. We're talking about the 3 linebackers. And Juan Price, Rashad Weaver, and Patrick Jones didn't play linebacker in this defense. They had their hand on the ground. They played defensive end in a 4-man front, and occasionally a 3-man front. Of actual linebackers, true linebackers, one of the 3, Money, Star, or Mike, Servassier Dennis is the only player drafted over the last 8 years. Why has it been such a, I don't want to call it a black hole because I don't think they've had terrible players there, but they have. Why has the linebacker fell behind defensive line and defensive back so much? I think there's a few reasons. One, I don't think they inherited a great crop of linebackers, although Matt Galambos and Mike Caprera were better in 2015 than a lot of fans probably give them credit for. At the same time, they didn't inherit a lot of great defensive linemen. Out of those 5 linemen who were drafted, only 1 was a player they inherited in Juan Price. The other 4 were Patrick Jones, Rashad Weaver, Jalen Twyman, and Kalijah Cansey. Why were they better there? They were better there because Charlie Partridge. They've had better coaching and better recruiting at the defensive line. At defensive back, they've had several guys they inherited. Really, they inherited Avonte Maddox. He's the only player they actually inherited who got drafted. Dane Jackson and Jordan Whitehead were inherited commitments, but they ultimately signed with Pat Narduzzi. And then Jason Pinnock and Damari Mathis and Damar Hamlin and Eric Hallett and Brandon Hill were all recruited, coached, and developed by Pat Narduzzi and his staff. But that's a stark contrast. 13 defensive linemen and defensive backs drafted, 1 linebacker. That's a stark contrast, and it speaks to the talent level that has been on these teams on defense. And as good as the defenses have been over the last 8 years, and as much as they've flourished and led this team to a lot of its success, it's not a stretch to say that very little of it came from the linebackers, even though linebackers made plays. I mean, Servassier Dennis made a lot of plays. Those early years, Matt Galambos made a lot of plays in 2015. Sean Idowu over 3 years made a lot of plays. Sometimes he was the only one out there making plays, but he made a lot of plays. But it has been, if you were going to rank position groups, and you could even go as far as DN, D tackle, linebacker, corner, safety, if you were going to rank 5 position groups under Narduzzi, somebody has to be number 5, and it's the linebackers. But let's swing this into something positive, because I think things are trending up with the linebackers. I do. You got a draft pick this year in Servassier Dennis. You have, I think, with this year's group, with Shane Simon in the middle, Bengali Kamara and Solomon DeShields on the outside, Brandon George as a backup at the middle or the money linebacker spot. If those 4 guys stay healthy, I think you have a chance to have maybe the best, most productive, well, I shouldn't say productive because stats can be weird sometimes, but I think you have a chance to have the best linebacker group we've seen under Narduzzi. I don't know if they're going to live up to that, but I think you have a chance to have it. Even if there's a drop-off from Servassier Dennis to Shane Simon, I think it gets made up with the sort of upgrade of Bengali Kamara from last year to this year, and then ultimately Shane Simon from last year to Solomon DeShields this year. I think Kamara and DeShields are NFL players. They're built like NFL players. They run like NFL players. They're big. They're athletic. They're hard hitters. They're going to make plays, and I think they're going to make plays all season, and I think they will be an upgrade. Those 2 at outside linebacker, Kamara and DeShields, will be an upgrade over last year's outside linebackers, Kamara and Shane Simon. And I think Kamara, just the natural progress of getting better from his first year as a starter to his second year as a starter. And DeShields, because I just think he's a better athlete, and I think he's going to blow up this year. He got a lot of snaps last season, played 200-some snaps, I think it was, on defense. And almost all in the third down Delta package, where he was able to explode as a pass rusher. He's going to have more responsibilities this year. He's going to be able to mix it up a little bit more. He's going to stick his nose in there against the run more because he's going to be playing more on base downs. And I think he's going to excel. I think those guys will be one of the best groups we've seen come out of Pitt. And ultimately, I think they'll produce multiple draft picks. I think Bengali Kamara, he'll have the option to come back and play in 2024. If he has the season I expect him to have this year, I don't think he comes back. I think he goes to the NFL, and I think he gets drafted. I think he probably tests pretty well and then, goes in as a draft pick. Solomon DeShields, it probably, he'll be the same as Kamara. He'll have the option to come back in 2024. And actually, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, because he has the COVID year and he redshirted, he potentially could come back in 2025 as well, I think. Because he should have that option. Kamara did not redshirt, so he would just have 1 more year left. DeShields did, so he would have 2 more years left potentially after this. But if he has a similar blow-up breakout year, you could see him going as well. He is a 4th-year player this year. So it's not out of the realm of possibility to see multiple draft picks at linebacker next spring. And if not next spring, multiple draft picks at linebacker over the next 2 or 3 years. But it's not just the upperclassmen that should have you excited about Pitt's linebackers and feeling optimistic about the future of Pitt's linebackers, because it goes even beyond that. And I'm sort of glossing over Shane Simon and Brandon George, but I think those guys are solid players who know the defense and will do a good job leading the linebackers and leading the defense overall. I'm not sure they're the playmakers and impact players that Kamara and DeShields are, but that's okay. You don't need everybody to have, 11 tackles for loss and 5 sacks, and 2 interceptions. You don't need everybody to have that kind of stat line. If you get a couple guys doing that, and then everybody else just being solid role players, you can be really good. But it goes beyond that top group of 4. And it's there's the top group of 4 of Kamara, Simon, DeShields, and George. And then there's the bottom group of 4 where I think you have every reason to be just as excited. Well, not just as excited. I shouldn't say that because a lot of it's projection, but every reason to be excited. Kyle Lewis is a redshirt freshman. I think the coaches are really, really high on what his future is and how good he's going to be this year, providing depth, and then in future years as a main contributor to the defense. And then the 3 freshmen they brought in this summer. Well, not all this summer. Braylon Lovelace came in January, but the 3 new freshmen, the 3 kids from the recruiting class of 2023. I haven't heard a coaching staff as high on a group of freshman linebackers since, maybe like back when Clint Session and HB Blades. I think Clint Session, HB Blades, and Chris McKillop all came in together. I want to double check that. There was a class of linebackers. I think Chris McKillop was part of it. Was it 2004? I want to say. Let me just bring up the commitment list here on Rivals.com. You always should have Rivals open so you can check this stuff. No, it must have been 2003 because 2004 had Vernon Smith, which legend of the message boards. 2003. HB Blades, Chris McKillop, and Clint Session. In addition to Duron Thomas and Joe Claremont, they were listed as linebackers on Rivals. But Blades, McKillop, and Chris McKillop, and Clint Session, even though Chris would ultimately move to defensive end. But the Pitt staff was, over the moon about those guys. And that was back with like Walt Harris, Paul Rhodes, and that coaching staff. This coaching staff, I hear the same level of excitement about Rasheem Biles, Jordan Bass, and Braylon Lovelace. Seeing these guys in practice, Bass is built like he's ready to play right now. He is huge. Rasheem Biles is bigger than I gave him credit for, or than I expected him to be, and really athletic. Braylon Lovelace, from being here in January, has filled in considerably. I saw him in person last summer at a camp, and seeing him at training camp now, it's incredible how he has bulked up. All three guys are athletic. All three guys are really filling in and look physical. And they all fit this mold of guys that Pitt has recruited over the last few years of athletic linebackers. Guys who often, at times were playing safety or even wide receiver in high school. That's what Jordan Bass was doing. He was a safety and a wide receiver. You should watch Jordan Bass's high school highlights from his senior year. He takes screen pass like 65 yards. How many linebackers are taking screen passes 65 yards? How many linebackers with Power 5 size, which is what Jordan Bass has? When you see him in person, you say, holy cow, this guy looks like an SEC linebacker, just physically, coming off the bus. And how many guys built like that are taking screen passes 65 yards? It might have been longer. I forget the exact yardage. Rasheem Biles was a safety in high school. Braylon Lovelace, I think, probably played linebacker at Leechburg, but he was built like a safety. If he had been at a bigger school, he would have been playing safety. They just needed him around the ball as much as possible. Oh, and he was like a 1,000-yard rusher as a running back. Kyle Lewis in the 2022 class, same thing. Safety, do-everything athlete in high school. Marquand Pope, who signed in the 2022 class. Safety, do-everything kind of athlete. Actually, he just played safety because I think he was at a huge high school in Texas. He didn't need to play both ways. This has been the trend the last couple of years of linebacker recruiting for Pitt, and it's worked. And 2021, Preston Levant, kind of a similar sort of thing, but he didn't work out. But 2020 is the Kamara and DeShields class. Guess what they did in high school? Safety and wide receiver. This is the mold that they're going for, and it seems to be working pretty well, of taking these guys who are bigger safeties, but maybe smaller linebackers, bulking them up when they get here, but maintaining that athleticism so that they can defend against defenses in the ACC. I think linebacker is trending up because of the path that the coaches have put themselves on in terms of their recruiting and the guys they're landing. And now the future looks as bright at linebacker as I think, just about any other spot. Truly. I think when you look at this freshman class, it's really impressive. These young linebackers, Bass, Biles, and Lovelace. And I think they're going to be really, really good. I think if there are no injuries to the top four, there's probably going to be limited playing time for those young guys. But if there's an injury, you're going to see freshmen on the field. And I wouldn't be surprised if one or two of those guys burns his red shirt just playing a lot of special teams and occasional snaps in the base defense. But I think, like I say, I think the arrow's pointing up on linebacker, and I think it'll start this year. This will be the year where you'll really see the linebackers making a positive impact, which is funny because we're waiting now for the defensive line and the safeties to kind of come together, whereas the past few years, those have been the strengths of the defense kind of around the linebackers. Now the strength is going to be in the middle with at least until the D-line and the safeties catch up. Corners will be really good, though. So it's an interesting situation with linebacker, and I think Servassier Dennis getting drafted this year will likely start a trend, I think, of linebacker draft picks for Pitt over the next few years. So that'll be something to look forward to. So, we started off talking about a bunch of bummers about the linebackers, at least historically, but we ended on a high note. I like to do that. I like to leave you feeling good and having good vibes. We did it yesterday with the basketball stuff. We'll do it today with the linebackers. We'll find something happy to talk about again tomorrow. Keep the good vibes going, man, right? I need a shirt that says good vibes only. Maybe Homefield makes a good vibes only shirt. Don't forget to get that promo code Lair23 for your 15% off on your first order. Homefieldapparel.com. That's an extra promo. Just dropping it in there. All right, stay tuned to Panther-Lair.com for all the coverage from training camp today. We'll have lots of it, photos, videos, interviews, practice reports, all that stuff. So you get it at Panther-Lair.com, and like and subscribe this video so you never miss any of our exclusive video content, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Thanks again for tuning in today. Hope your week is off to a great start. Enjoy your Tuesday, and we'll be back with you tomorrow for another Morning Pit right here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.